morning! We are now on our first quarter Module 2, entitled Sports Injuries and First Aid. At the end of the learning period, the student shall have identified the common injuries that may happen during sports settings and physical activities. Suggested possible ways to alleviate the suffering of an injured student. Simulated the application of appropriate first aid techniques to specific injuries that may occur in physical activity and sports setting. But before we go through our lesson, let's have a pre-test. Rearrange the jumbled letters to form the word that is described in each item. Number 1. This is the result of overstretching or tearing of the ligaments. Number 2. This is the result of overstretching of the muscles or tendons. Number 3. Any injury that interferes with how the knee joint moves. Number 4. It is also known as broken bones. Number 5. When this injury happens, a bone is forced out of its socket. Did you get it all? Good. Now, let us review our past lesson. Last module, you are able to learn the different components of physical fitness. Enumerate the following health-related fitness and skills-related fitness components. Did you remember it all? Very good. Now, let us proceed to our new lesson. There are common injuries that may happen during sports and physical activities. In this phase, we will learn to provide possible ways to alleviate the suffering and apply appropriate first aid techniques. From here, follow-up activities will be given to elicit your tentative understanding. First aid. First aid is an immediate and temporary care given to a person who has been injured or suddenly taken ill. It includes self-help and home care if medical assistance is not available or delayed. First aid is given to prolong the life of the person who is injured or needed medical care. Sports injury. Sports injury is an injury that occurs when engaging in sports or exercises. We all know that we can be injured in playing different sports events, so we should always be careful in playing. And one of the injuries that we may acquire is sprain. Sprain is a stretch or tear of a ligament, the bond connective tissue, that joins the end of one bone with another. This usually happens during a sports event that includes running, such as in basketball and soccer. Here is the first aid for sprain. Remove any clothing or jewelry around the joint. Apply cold compress at once. Elevate the affected joint. The victim's physician may recommend an over-the-counter anti-inflammatory medication appropriate for the victim's general health. Do you remember it all? That's great! Another sports injury that you may acquire is heat exhaustion. Heat exhaustion is a response to heat characterized by fatigue, weakness, and collapse due to inadequate intake of water to compensate for loss of fluids during sweating. And there are two types of heat exhaustion. One is water depletion, and the other one is salt depletion. This usually happens to a sports event which is exposed to direct sunlight. So always be careful in playing under the sun and drink plenty of water. And here's the first aid for heat exhaustion. Have the victim lie down with his/her feet elevated. Keep the victim cool. Give him/her electrolyte beverages to sip or make a salted drink. Monitor the victim for signs of shock. If the victim starts having seizures, protect him/her from injury and give first aid for convulsion. If the victim loses consciousness, give first aid for unconsciousness. Did you get it? Great! Always remember this first aid. It will be a big help. Now, let us proceed to our activities. Demonstrate first aid for sprain. Next, demonstrate first aid for heat exhaustion. Did you do it all right? Good job. How did you feel about the activity? What observation have you noticed while doing the first aid? Now, to wrap up our lesson for today, complete the open-ended statement. I will give safety first aid to victims whose suffering is sprained by. I will give safety first aid to victims whose suffering heat exhaustion by. And for our valuing, is first aid a worthwhile learning activity of teenagers today? Why? Will you able to apply the knowledge of giving first aid if you know your members of the family suffer from this kind of injuries? How? As a student, do you think it is important that first aid should be a part of curriculum in Mapeh? Why? Now, answer the following question. Read each statement carefully and identify the letter that corresponds to your answer. Number 1. This is an immediate and temporary care given to a person who has been injured or sudden take ill. A. First aider. B. First aid. C. Ambulance. D. Clinic. Number 2. It is caused by torn fiber in a ligament. Swelling and bruising are some signs and symptoms. A. Sprain. B. Heat exhaustion. C. First aid. D. Dislocation. Number 3. It is a response to heat characterized by fatigue, weakness, and collapse due to inadequate intake of water to compensate for loss of fluids during sweating. A. Sprain. B. Heat exhaustion. C. First aid. D. Dislocation. Number 4. These are injuries that occur when engaging in sports or exercises. A. Sports. B. Injuries. C. Sports injuries. D. Sports activity. Number 5. What do you think is the best character of a first aider? A. Smart. B. Calm. C. Patience. D. All of the above. Are you done? Okay, that's all for today. For your other compliance, have a video of yourself performing the first aid for sprain and heat exhaustion. And for the other written activities, these are provided on your worksheet. Thank you and God bless. Happy learning!